It's 2020 and we're celebrating a new year, thinking of those resolutions for the year to come. However, on the other side of the world, the news isn't so great. There's a new outbreak of an unknown virus in China. In the city of Wuhan, those who are becoming ill seem to have a link to a local fish market. People are becoming seriously ill, and cases continue to rise and spread. The World Health Organization then announces that this is a new coronavirus. The news that no one wanted to hear, that the outbreak is a global pandemic. Testing ramps up around the world. Governments provide guidance to the best they can. Travel plans are halted. Despite these measures, more and more people become ill. We see our first case in the bubble of St. Andrews. Then,
we will beat the coronavirus, and we will beat it together. And therefore, I urge you, at this moment of national emergency, to stay at home, protect our NHS, and save lives. Thank you.
For everyone, you must stay at home unless it is absolutely essential to go out, and that includes working from home wherever possible. Life should not feel normal for you right now, so if it is, then you are not doing the right things, and I want to ask you today to please put that right.
The biggest negative, I would say for me, has been massive workload, because what I found was that to deliver materials in a new way to students, labs and lectures, I just had to rewrite everything. And it felt as though I was rewriting all my lectures from scratch. Now, normally I would every year look at every lecture, maybe spend an hour on ones that are relatively the same, and then one or two lectures out of each module I might completely rewrite each year and radically update them. So this time I just found that each lecture was taking me a day to reprise, and it involves things like having to add really extensive additional notes to the lecture so that students who are looking at your lecture through Panopto are picking up on all the details which normally I would speak when I was lecturing to the students live. I also found this remote delivery through recorded lectures actually personally very difficult, because my stuff that I teach is quite theoretical and it's kind of difficult. The concepts are difficult. And normally when I'm teaching, I will be looking around the room while I'm explaining stuff. And I think I pace a lot according to reading the faces, and if people are looking lost, I'll stop and talk to them. Even in quite a big room, I'll do that. So I found it actually really quite difficult being this sort of a broadcaster rather than an interactive teacher. So that I found all pretty challenging, I must say. I also don't enjoy Panopto recording. I have my cuddly toys on the desk. They sit there and listen. But even so, I find it seems quite an unnatural process, just sort of talking to yourself. So yeah, also technically a bit challenging, and that was another negative for me, is that I felt I spent a lot of time over the summer actually arguing with IT problems, some of which actually turned out to be quite profound. And I did then discover, and this is going to the upside of things, there is brilliant support at the university, both from immediate colleagues in biology, some of whom had kind of wrangled their way around the same corners themselves, but also going to the sort of higher level, to the IT support team, teaching support team, have been extremely helpful and have very quickly responded to problems and queries. So actually the feeling of solidarity amongst colleagues has been brilliant. I've also had very good support from the school for just general advice and specific problems that I've had. Line managers and the head of school indeed have been really, really helpful. So that has been very good. The additional workload has also impacted the research side of my work. And again, this is going perhaps back to a bit of a negative, that my postdoctoral researchers who are modelers have still found life difficult because of the isolation. Because the reason they've come to St Andrews and chosen to be at St Andrews is the atmosphere, the other people around that they can work with. And I think both PhD and postdoctoral researchers have been finding that working from home, sometimes they just feel isolated, and that really impacts productivity because you're not getting the spark of chatting to someone else. Oh, I'm wrestling with this issue, right? I don't know what to do. This bit of code isn't working. Somebody else will often say, oh, right, yeah, I've met that problem. Here's what you do. Or have you thought about so-and-so? And although we've all been trying to work remotely in those ways, there is something about actually being in the same building and chatting over coffee and so on that really promotes those positive interactions. So I think we've all really missed that in our research work. And then other positives, I think this new way of working has been quite good for the environment in that it's cut down a lot of our travel to meetings. It has caused some things to be cancelled, which I think has been sad. It's also caused some meetings to be held online, and I think in some cases that's really successful. So actually I think the big conferences where people give talks and posters seem to have worked out not too badly online, because you can record your talk, you can record your virtual poster, and people can view it from home through their computer. Obviously, again, there is a missing out on the kind of meeting people, chatting to people around those sessions. So yeah, interesting. But I feel actually that some of the meetings I've had through screens have been very effective, and actually it saved people traveling, it saved people making journeys by car or train. And for short meetings that are an hour or two at most, I think that method can work really well. And I think the good thing about that is that in future, that will probably facilitate us meeting with colleagues who are overseas or in further parts of Britain more often, more regularly, which might help quite a few projects that I'm involved in. So I think there are big positives there in terms of learning about new ways to do things. I don't want to go into massive detail, but I'm somebody with a caring responsibilities for an elderly mum, and it has been a challenge that she lives not far away. She has a wonderful team of carers who look after her, but of course during lockdown we actually were not allowed to go visit, and that was incredibly hard for her. And I know every morning I turn on the news and I hear stories of all the even more difficult challenges that other people are facing. So I know I'm not alone. I know this is a very widespread experience during the pandemic, but yeah, that has been difficult. I've also found it somewhat heartbreaking to not be able to see my kids, who are grown-up kids. They're living, you know, in their own places. One's in Glasgow, one's in Oxford. We won't be seeing them at Christmas. Those things hurt, right? But it is a decision that we've all reached together. It's something we've all thought about a lot and agreed on. So I'm okay with it, but it is a little bit melancholy not to be having that sort of big family happy time that we would normally have without having to worry or feel that we were putting anybody at risk. So yeah, so it's tough. Other positives that I could add, I think, are that I've found some of my students to be amazingly resilient and coping extraordinarily well, given that I think the experience they're having this year is not what they had hoped for, and they must be disappointed. I know that actually some of them have said that they find aspects of the virtual teaching to work very well for them, which is interesting and I had not expected. So some of the students say that they really like the recorded lectures because they can play back the bits that they find hard to understand and they can loop them and go through them a few times. Whereas even if in class, they might pluck up the courage to ask you to explain something one time again. If they still don't get it, it's very difficult for them to ask again for you to explain. And in fact, I would say generally that's not expected etiquette. Generally, if a student asks you to repeat something, you will do it once, and then probably you would gloss over it if they asked again. So I can see this. I find it very interesting, and it did lead me to think that actually a really good thing to do if we go back to in-person teaching, I still might want to give some lectures in person, but I would panopto them so that any students who want to go back through and go over my incoherent explanations, they can get them another time. Yeah, so I think that's interesting. I've been very impressed with a lot of the students kind of in terms of their personal support for us and one another. I think a lot of them appreciate we're working very hard on their behalf and have been quite tolerant about things like perhaps waiting for turnaround of marking where they know that staff are really overwhelmed with all sorts of conflicting responsibilities at the moment. Some students, I think, actually quite like working from home. Another thing about positive outcomes has been that I've actually enjoyed working from home. I think I didn't say that earlier on, but actually I really have. I like my house, and it's nice because my husband is working from home as well, so we get to have lunch together. And normally he works in Edinburgh, and we have quite a short social time at the end of the day after he gets back from work. It's actually really nice to just be around at the same time as my husband, and it's made me think that after post-COVID, one of the changes that I would quite like to make is to formalise working from home some days so that we can continue to do this. I also think that working from home saves, for me, about an hour of commuting time back and forth to work each day. That's an hour I can use. That's a valuable hour. It's also saving carbon as well. So in those ways, I actually think that has been really positive for me, and I find it relaxing to be here as well. And I think it feels kind of nice. I don't really have a problem separating other things from work. I think that if that problem exists, it's not for me contingent on being in a different place. The one thing is difficult is just the not seeing colleagues in a particularly sort of friendly semi-work, semi-social interactions that go on in the office. So I miss those. But I have also been managing, particularly with colleagues that I'm already friendly with and know a bit better, trying to actually have some social time built in has been a really good initiative, and some folks have been very good at really promoting that. So actually getting together specifically to have a coffee and a chat, not a meeting, has been really nice, and a few people I've managed to keep in touch with that way. Normally my meetings often take me across town, so St Andrews is quite a distributed university, so sometimes meetings will have me kind of pinging across from one side of town to the other. There is a time overhead there, which actually I think now we might do some of those meetings over Teams instead, saving everybody, you know, maybe a quarter of an hour, half an hour of sort of just transit time between meetings. I think that might be a really good thing going forward as well. And I don't think that will stop us meeting socially, but I think it might just be quite efficient for some work meetings to do them that way. one of the things I think is most important to come out of this is the environmental impact of what we do may have been reduced a bit during the pandemic. I think it's something I had been already thinking about a lot is academic travel and the sort of potential irony, even hypocrisy, of going to big international meetings where thousands of people are making plane journeys to go to a meeting that is about a fundamentally environmental topic. And I do hope that this is something that going forward, we might all reflect very seriously on what the alternatives are to making these big international trips. Sometimes I would say, I think they can be really important. And I think there are times when you do need to get people together to sit in a room and discuss something at length. It's difficult to have a long meeting over Teams, I think. So if you're wrangling coding, or if you're wrangling theory, and obviously for colleagues who do actual field work, you've really probably got to have some level of international travel. But I really hope that we're going to be more reflective and more thoughtful now that we've seen what the alternatives can be. I would say there are quite a lot of IT challenges ahead. So some of those you're going to have to confront as to how you're going to do things. Really, you need to think about workflow, by which I mean, if you are planning a computer lab to be delivered online, there's quite a lot of preparation in terms of documentation required to support that, and all the possible difficulties that students are going to have if they're trying to work more independently and with perhaps a bit less personal support from lecturers and tutors wandering around a classroom. So in terms of working out how to work with code, with documents, with the online delivery through Moodle, etc., really work out how to do it, right? And then start preparing your sessions, because once you've got a sort of workflow decided on, and there are an awful lot of alternative methods out there which you can spend a long time investigating, it takes a while to do that. So once you've got that worked out, then is the time to actually go and work on the individual labs, not jumping in and thinking, oh, I need this lab for, you know, a month's time. I'll start with what I've got and then kind of try and sort of wrangle it in. Right, it's different. So just take that on. That's what I'd say to myself if I was doing it again. I'd actually like to post a huge thank you to my colleagues who have been just magnificently helpful and supportive throughout this whole process. And I think we've all had to recognize and understand that other people are under a lot of stress, and that this causes problems to emerge in different directions sometimes. But actually, I think everyone has been incredibly intelligent about understanding this and has been really very supportive to me and to other colleagues. And I've really appreciated small gestures, like being phoned up by the deputy head of school, who's phoning around people just to see how they are, right? I think that's a lovely thing to do. I've found that everybody at every level that I've interacted with, including extremely busy people with huge responsibilities, have made time for me when I've asked for it. So I've really appreciated that. Huge, huge thank you.